Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to our presentation. Thanks for deciding to watch our presentation here. My name is Mark, and I'm here today with two of my colleagues, Larry and Oliver. You can see our names there on the slide. We all work at a small private university in Kumamoto in Japan called Sojo University. And today we're going to talk about a survey that we administered to our students in 2019, pre-pandemic, to investigate foreign language enjoyment and anxiety within the English classroom. Okay, so I'm going to turn things over to Larry now, and he'll discuss some of the literature covering the key concepts of this study.
So our research deals with the emotions of Japanese university students enrolled in a compulsory English course. When most people think about the role of emotion in the classroom, they tend to think about negative emotions, frustration, boredom, and most often anxiety. And a focus on these kinds of negative emotional experiences, especially a focus on anxiety, has dominated research on emotion in second language learning. Foreign language anxiety, or as it's also known, foreign language classroom anxiety, is a form of anxiety that's unique to learning and using a second language. This kind of anxiety tends to develop as a result of repeated exposure to anxiety-provoking situations, such as taking tests, speaking in front of others, and feeling less able than peers. Anxious learners then associate these feelings with the second language. However, recently there's been a shift in the study of emotion in second language learning. Rather than focusing on negative emotions, such as anxiety, there's been a focus on positive emotions, such as interest, pride, and engagement. And these emotions, rather than disabling language learning, help language learning. This follows a broader movement in psychology towards the focus on factors that allow people to flourish. And this movement is termed positive psychology. When language learners experience positive emotions in the classroom, they're better able to notice things, and this helps them become more aware of language input. And this in turn helps them better absorb the L2. Positive emotions also help learners to take risks, explore, and play, and these actions help to build bonds between learners. One important emotion that has received a lot of attention recently is enjoyment. This emotion has been tied to a number of positive outcomes, including improved motivation, greater willingness to communicate, and better performance in the classroom. Furthermore, research has shown that enjoyment has two broad sources: developing interpersonal relationships and a sense of achievement while making progress towards a goal. While this concept has been widely studied outside of Japan, enjoyment in a language learning context hasn't been studied much in Japan, and no research has been done with university students in a compulsory English course. And this is the rationale for our research and this presentation.
Okay, so back to me. Thank you, Larry. Okay, just to give you some information about the context within which this study was done. The survey students were enrolled in a course called English Communication 4 as part of the English program at Sojo University in Kumamoto. The first year students, in first semester, they do English Communication 1, and then second semester, English Communication 2, and then second year students will do 3 and 4 in their second year. So that's kind of how the program works. The English program is compulsory for all first year and second year students. And we don't have an English major here at our university. Students major in subjects that are typical at a STEM university, things such as biotechnology, computer information and design, mechanical engineering, and we actually have a pretty good pharmacy department here as well. So that's kind of the context within which this study was done. So a few words about the curriculum that the students take part in. These are second year students in the second semester of their second year. And these are the goals of the course for the second semester. The first one is to sustain and extend conversations on various personal topics, and also topics related to their field of study. So, for example, mechanical engineering students, hopefully, will be able to talk and maybe hold a conversation, a simple conversation, talking about what they study here at university. Second goal is to talk and write about personal experiences, and the third one is to read simple English texts more quickly. So this is the basic design of the course that the students took who were surveyed here. So how do we go about achieving and assessing these goals? So for the ability to sustain extended conversation, that is basically done via a 3-person speaking test that is held at the end of the semester. So three students come together. They're assigned a topic that they have practiced in the semester, and they're asked to speak for, I think it's about 4 or 5 minutes on that topic. The ability to talk and write about personal experiences is evaluated through what's called an extended monologue. Basically, students will write and record a story on a given topic. For example, students might be asked to tell a story about what they did last weekend. So it's a monologue. It's not a conversation. The students just tell a story and record their story about what they did last weekend or their summer vacation and whatnot. And then lastly, the ability to read simple text more quickly. This is kind of based on, I think, a textbook put out by Paul Nation, the Speed Reading for Fluency or something like that, where students read a number of texts all about the same length, and they're asked to time themselves, and after they read the text, they answer some questions about the text. So they're asked to time themselves reading the text and then record the score that they got on the questions. So that's the curriculum within which this study was done. So now we're going to turn it over to the research questions in detail.
Okay, now I'd like to talk about the research questions for our study. As you can see, there were 4 research questions which guided our research. We wanted to understand how enjoyment, anxiety, and a number of other learner variables related and what effect these had on each other. We also wanted to know what our learners saw as the sources of their enjoyment and anxiety. And finally, we wanted to know if there were gender differences in the variables we included in our study. We surveyed all of the second-year students and received 598 valid responses. There were 408 males, 189 females, and 1 respondent did not indicate their gender. The purpose of the research was explained to all the participants, and informed consent was obtained by a final question on the survey, which allowed participants to opt out of the research study. We adopted the mixed method design known as a convergent parallel design. In this design, qualitative and quantitative data are gathered together, and the qualitative data is used to validate and add depth to the results from the questionnaire data. All items and questions were presented in Japanese. So as you can see, we asked students to provide some demographic information such as their department and gender. To measure foreign language enjoyment, there were 12 items on the survey, and these used a 6-point Likert scale, moving from disagree strongly to agree strongly. For foreign language anxiety, there were 6 items using the same 6-point scale. Respondents rated their attitude toward English on 5 levels, from very negative to very positive, with the midpoint being neutral. Relative level of English was also rated using 5 levels, from much lower than my classmates to much higher than my classmates. We also asked students to tell us which of the 4 skills they use most in class, as this has been shown to affect levels of enjoyment and anxiety in past research. To examine the relationships between FLE, FLCA, and the other variables such as attitudes towards English, relative level, and the language skill used in the class, we used a number of analyses, including Pearson's correlation, t-tests, and ANOVA. For differences between gender, we used t-tests. Qualitative data was coded using a data-driven approach, and we used multiple rounds of codings to ensure reliability. Now I'd like to move on to the results quickly. For the quantitative results, I'd like to give a quick summary. The majority of the results are either similar to that in the past research, and not so surprising, learners with a better attitude toward English or who felt they were at a higher level relative to their classmates expressed more enjoyment and less anxiety. However, one interesting finding, our learners expressed more enjoyment and less anxiety. This is different from most past research, which has shown that Asian learners are the opposite, having more anxiety and less enjoyment. When we looked at the effect of learners' attitudes towards English, their relative level, and the skills they used most in class on enjoyment and anxiety, using ANOVA, we found that there were general trends of higher enjoyment and less anxiety among students with a more positive attitude or a higher level. And this is similar to the findings of past research done outside Japan. Interestingly, we found that students who reported using productive skills in class expressed more enjoyment and less anxiety than those students who expressed using a lot of receptive skills. Finally, looking at gender differences, female learners reported higher scores overall than male learners, but only the differences in relative level between the students rose to a degree of significance in ANOVA.
Okay, so as well as Likert scale questions, there was a space in the survey for students to give written responses to help identify parts of the course which are sources of enjoyment or anxiety. And this kind of qualitative data is very useful for teachers to adapt classroom activities and to adapt the EC4 course more generally to maybe mitigate anxiety among the student body and try to increase enjoyment within English classes. So first, enjoyment. You can see on the screen there are some responses from students which detail enjoyable experiences they had in EC4. And with initial analysis of these responses, we were able to identify three broad categories of response. So classroom activities, social aspects of English class, and mastery or improvement of English skills. Perhaps unsurprisingly, gamified classroom activities such as vocabulary study using Quizlet Live or quizzes on Kahoot were often mentioned as an enjoyable part of English class. Students also identified the self-directed learning unit, which is part of the second year English curriculum, wherein students are given freedom to choose how they will study as a source of enjoyment. And this perhaps suggests that learner agency is a key factor in enjoyment for some students. Other students identified group work, talking with partners, and learning about their classmates' lives as sources of enjoyment in their classes. And this social aspect of English class, the opportunity for students to interact in ways they might not normally by using a second language, is very important in English classes, but obviously it's been complicated more recently because of the COVID-19 pandemic. The responses also point to a sense of progress being key for a student to feel enjoyment in their English classes, and many students identify activities that they felt they'd mastered or receiving recognition from teachers and peers as a big source of learner enjoyment.
Okay, and moving on to anxiety, the other side of the coin, as opposed to enjoyment. As with enjoyment, we asked students to make a comment on anything that in the EC4 course that caused them anxiety. And looking through all the comments, we were able to pull out 3 areas which students indicated were anxiety-inducing for them. First off, speaking. This came up quite a bit. There were many comments that students noted that they're not sure what to say when they're put on the spot. There are also concerns about if their pronunciation and grammar is good enough for their peers or for the teacher to understand what they're saying. And there weren't so many comments in regards to speaking to the teacher, or in particular the activity where students were doing monologues where they were speaking on their own. Most of the comments seem to be directed toward group speaking activities, so they seem to be more anxious about speaking in front of others. Next up, we noticed there were a lot of comments with regards to listening, giving them anxiety. Both listening to the teacher, not understanding what the teacher was saying, not understanding instructions for a particular activity, as well as listening with regards to the content of listening activities. So they couldn't, if they were doing a listening activity, they couldn't understand what was being said. They weren't able to answer the questions correctly, and this was making them nervous and giving them anxiety. Okay. Interestingly, there were very few comments about not being able to understand their peers. So it appears as though they can understand each other when speaking in group activities, but maybe can't understand the teacher so well, or listening activities, which could have something to do with maybe native-like pronunciation, which is giving them problems and causing them anxiety. Finally, grammar. This is not surprising. There's a lot of focus put on students in junior high schools and high schools in Japan, where grammar, having correct grammar is a big focus there. And so I think students are probably hypersensitive to that. So we did find that there were a lot of students writing that they were concerned about their grammar, mostly with regard to writing activities, but also with regard to speaking, whether or not their poor grammar would make it difficult for them to be understood.
Okay, so in conclusion, we think enjoyment and anxiety can be understood as being 2 sides of the same coin. Productive skills such as speaking or writing are associated with higher enjoyment and lower anxiety for some students. The social aspect of English classes also seems to be a source of enjoyment for some students, and this is suggested by their answers to our qualitative questions. However, production and group work can also be a source of anxiety for other students, particularly those with lower proficiency. So teachers should bear this in mind when designing classes, as any activity could be a source of enjoyment for some students and a source of anxiety for others. If you have any questions, please see our poster and send us an email, ask us for more information. Thank you very much for watching our presentation. Goodbye.